for the purposes of time, I'm just going to start in 2015, and I'm starting in 2015 because that is the year of Made in China 2025. So at this point, China is now the world's largest oil importer. So all that hope that China was actually going to be an exporter to the world is actually completely gone, and the opposite is the case. And China is also, as we know, by 2015, the world's largest carbon emitter by some distance. It then announces this strategy, which has been extraordinarily successful, to make China the world's high-tech manufacturing superpower, and to make the energy transition central to that ambition. Now, AI is also, I'm going to leave largely AI out of this story, but you could make some of the same argument through AI. And in particular, electric vehicles and batteries are central to the ambitions of Made in China 2025. I think the only response that the Western states, meaning North American and Western European in particular, can make to this is the return of their state to compete in those areas where China is setting the new terms of industrial competition, and to accelerate the energy transition, because if the fossil fuel energy economy is not sustainable in a world in which China is the kind of carbon consumer that it has become, and in which any number of other Asian countries have also radically increased their energy consumption. So the fossil fuel energy world that was there in the 70s, in which that crisis came into, was essentially one that was dominated by Western energy, high per capita energy consumption. That world went in the countries where the several generations of politicians have not seriously thought about energy questions because they think there's something that markets take care of. China's engineering-focused leadership, we're never going to forget the fact that energy is a matter of physics as much as climate is a matter of physics. Indeed, I would argue it's more a matter of physics than climate. It's the actual laws of the universe that are playing out. They were never going to project ideas onto a green energy transition. And what I want to suggest is that China is the fundamental reason why the old order isn't coming back, and it can't come back.
When you design a green industrial policy, there is an expectation that the policy is a great piece of document or legislation and it will stand the test of time. But that's impossible, right? Because especially on the green tech side, there are technological disruptions, there are regulatory changes, there are market changes. And so that's why I like to say that we need a curling approach to industrial policy rather than bowling. It's a very unpopular sport, so I don't expect you to get the reference. But the idea is with bowling, you throw the ball and you hope down the line that it will reach the target. With curling, you don't leave it to chance, as maybe none of you have ever watched a curling game, but there are sweepers on the side, right, that adjust the trajectory of the disc. And I believe that even though China is a very different case and it's, historically, culturally, size different, I think that this is the biggest lesson we can learn from China, is because they got a lot of things wrong, but instead of starting everything from scratch, they kept adjusting, evaluating, changing the policy. They even went as far as changing the structure of the Ministry of Energy because they realized there's just too much policy incoherence and energy is a cross-ministerial issue, right? There are not many countries that are able to just change their institutions just in terms of what works. And this is precisely the kind of work that we're trying to do at the Tide Center in terms of the how to make industrial policies work, especially on the green agenda, and not so much in terms of the what. And this is why narratives are extremely important. We shouldn't keep talking about green industrial policy from a virtue signaling point of view, but really from and green industrial policies are not just an act of ecological intention. It's first and foremost an act of macroeconomic resilience.
What I'd like to argue is that, a sort of entire liberal paradigm from the 1990s, a Rio Treaty to 2015 Paris has sort of come undone, and it has been eroded in the last 2 decades since the 2008 financial crisis. So what was the world like in 1990 when we were first thinking about international climate negotiations, the West was the problem and the West was the solution. The West was the OECD countries were the largest source of emissions and the holders of almost all of the technology that was required to solve the problem. And so it became very much a North-South sort of debate that the South demanded dollars and technology from the North. At this point in the 2020s, this is fully the West is no longer the largest source of emissions, and the West is no longer the holder of the masters of the green technologies that are required anymore. Decarbonization is just going to require a lot of manufacturing. Everything that you can kick and touch has to be replaced. 1 billion machines that are currently burning carbon, 1 billion cars on our streets in every country, tens of thousands of blast furnaces that produce steel, tens of thousands of turbines that burn coal have to be replaced. This entire stock of polluting machines have to be replaced. UNCTAD estimates that these 17 sort of green technologies could be a market of $10 trillion by 2030. And so far, for all the reasons that Amir explained, it's the rich countries, China included, China, East Asia, Europe, and the United States, that are seizing most of that value. The biggest problem that I see is sort of like the fiscal problem, which is the question about money. How are you actually going to fund these national green investment programs in a world of fiscal hawks, in a world of debt crises in the South? And, in the neoliberal period, a set of interests in the FIRE sector and affluent classes, they built a political coalition that constrains public spending through fiscal rules and policing of debt to GDP ratios in 100 countries of the South, policed by the IMF, and that prevents their spending on domestic priorities. And the fiscal problem requires a new set of actors, a new set of coalitions that can break free of this sort of debt to GDP constraints and sort of fiscal rules constraints.
Our economy produces more while using fewer resources on less land with cleaner air and falling emissions. And my favorite, in the times when everybody is talking about overconsumption, the per capita use of resources in the Netherlands actually decreased by 20% since 2000. So we use less resources while also growing economically. So for all the economists in the room, the environmental Kuznets curve, it's real. And why is this? Because when people become prosperous, when the economy is growing, people gain not only the financial means, but also the headspace to accept environmental regulations. So today, agriculture takes up nearly half of the world's habitable land, and it leaves less and less room for nature to thrive. So if we want to feed the world and make space for ecosystem, we need to concentrate food production. We must do more on less land with fewer inputs. We need to believe again that humans are a force for good. We need to believe in ourselves and see the future as a chance instead of a risk. I'm quite optimistic, and my wife is also quite optimistic, but we have quite, let's say, pessimistic kids. My middle kid, Isis, she's 12, and she's already thinking about not taking kids because of climate change. And this is like, she really sees the future as a risk instead of a chance. And we have to be confident about ourselves again. So we are the only species that actually cares about other species. So it was right, of course, that in the 20th century, we focused all our ingenuity, all our progress on improving human lives. We had to escape hunger, disease, and oppression. But now, as more of humanity live longer, safer, and better life, we can extend again our circle of care.